in The Origins of Propaganda, Hannah Arendt wrote that only the mob and the elite can be attracted by the momentum of totalitarianism itself. The masses have to be won by propaganda. Further, she stated, propaganda is one and possibly the most important instrument of totalitarianism for dealing with the non-totalitarian world. Arendt's statement draws attention to the central role propaganda played in the great totalitarian movements of the 20th century. These movements provide us the most vivid and extreme examples of how power is acquired and perpetuated. The example they provide underscore the essential function that communication plays in power relationships, and that it is more instrumental in sustaining domination than either force or terror. The relationship between power, communication, and propaganda is the subject of this episode. So join me now in the propaganda universe. In his extensive study of the nature of power, Michel Foucault asserts that power exists as a matter of relations between different actors, in which one actor has a higher capacity to influence the behavior of another. He describes power in terms of being a set of power relations between individuals and groups in which an actor desires to shape the behavior of others. To Foucault, power is not something that is possessed, but is constituted in the structure of an unbalanced relationship where one party acts upon the other and the other is acted upon, or allows himself to be acted upon. This unbalanced relationship is dynamic, as there is an interplay between the participants in the form of resistance to the terms of the relationship by the actor being dominated, and counteraction by the dominator. As Foucault explains this dynamic, the struggle is everywhere, at every moment. We move from rebellion to domination, from domination to rebellion, constituting what he refers to as a complex strategical situation. Further, power relations are embedded in the social fabric to the extent that they are interwoven in different types of relationships, such as in production, kinship, family, and sexuality. Key to the exercise of power within a relationship is a system of differentiations that create the capacity to act on others. These differentiations take the form of, for example, social status or privilege, legal, economic, cultural, know-how, and competence. According to Foucault, power is not something that exists in a binary relationship where power is centered in a single node, such as one individual, group, or class over others, but as something that forms and circulates within a network. To Foucault, it is preferable to think of those who are being acted upon not as inert objects or atoms that power is applied to, but as active relays through which they both submit to and exercise power. Within the network and among its relays, power is something that is elaborated, transformed, and organized. Quoting Foucault, power relations are rooted in the whole network of the social. Much like Foucault, communication scholar Manuel Castells' notion of power is constructed on the basis that it represents an asymmetrical relationship. Just as Foucault thought of power as a set of unequal relations, Castells defines power in terms of a relational capacity that enables a social actor to asymmetrically influence the decision of other social actors. Castells further explains that the amount of power is measured in degrees, as there is no such thing as absolute power, and there must be some amount of compliance on the part of the disadvantaged actor. Similar to Foucault, Castells notes the existence of resistance on the part of the one being acted upon and refers to this as counterpower. He argues that the reason for which power is being exercised stems from the recognition that there is some form of resistance to the ends towards which power is being applied. The degree of compliance on the part of the disadvantaged actor varies according to the level of resistance to the terms of the relationship. When resistance rises to a certain level, it can provoke a dramatic change to the relationship, such as the case in revolutions or the collapse of an institution. As far as the relationship between communication and power is concerned, Foucault took note that power relations are exercised to an exceedingly important extent through the production and exchange of signs that permit the exercise of a power, and that the production and circulation of elements of meaning can have as their objective certain results in the realm of power. Castells is more explicit in linking communication and power than Foucault by placing communication at the center of the power relationship. He asserts that communication is the decisive factor in the interaction of power and counterpower, as it mediates the way in which power relationships are constructed and challenged in every domain of social practice, including political practice. As far as mechanisms of power are concerned, Castells explains that power is exercised through coercion and or by the construction of meaning. The construction of meaning occurs during the act of social discourse, which is to say communication. Castells states that coercion or its threat in of themselves can only achieve limited effects. While the use of coercion can create the conditions for establishing power relations, he states that its use alone cannot stabilize domination. To sustain a power relationship, Castells asserts, the ability to build consent, or at least to instill fear and resignation vis-à-vis the existing order, is essential to enforce the rules that govern the institutions and organizations of society. In regards to the relationship between power, meaning, and communication, Castells argues that power relationships are largely based on the shaping of the human mind by the construction of meaning, which he states is mostly dependent on communication. Defining communication as the sharing of meaning through the exchange of information, he asserts mediated communication constitutes the symbolic environment in which people receive, process, and send the signals that produce meaning in their lives. To Castells, mediated communication in the contemporary world consists of multimodal networks of communication. It is within these communication networks where the process of constructing meaning occurs according to the flows of information and images that circulate within those networks. He makes the connection between communication, meaning, and power explicit when he states, "It is in the specific forms of connection between networks of communication and meaning in our world, and networks of communication and meaning in our brains, that the mechanisms of power making can ultimately be identified." All networks of power, Castells claims, exercise their power by influencing the human mind, predominantly through multimedia networks of mass communication. In terms of the relationship between coercion and communication in creating and sustaining power relationships, they are often used in complementary and reciprocal ways. As previously noted, the use of coercion by itself can only achieve limited effects. Coercion can set the conditions under which a power relationship is constructed, and in certain situations, the use of force against a center of resistance can serve to provide a negative example that resonates among a larger population. This has the effect of potentially enhancing or reestablishing the power relationship. The exclusive use of coercive force to impose domination, Castells maintains, ultimately results in the destruction of the dominated actor, effectively terminating any relationship, not to mention the commitment of extensive resources that would be necessary to sustain domination solely by coercion. To create reproducible domination, power relations must be institutionalized, which is the role that communication and the construction of meaning play. As Castells stated, to stabilize domination, it is necessary to build consent or instill fear and resignation with the existing order. In recasting the arc of human civilization in terms of the development of communication technology, Harold Innis identified the central role communication played in expanding empires while simultaneously centralizing power, and noted that the sword and pen work together. To this effect, Lenin was known to have said that the Soviet system was based on a balance of coercion and persuasion. In The Origins of Totalitarianism, Hannah Arendt observed that the totalitarian movements of the 20th century, in their quest to gain power, could not achieve their aim through terror alone, as the masses could only be won over by propaganda. She quotes Joseph Goebbels' deputy Eugene Hadamovsky as stating that the true goal of totalitarian propaganda was the accumulation of power without the possession of the means of violence. Propaganda, Arendt wrote, is possibly the most important instrument of totalitarianism. As far as proportion of coercion and communication that are needed to sustain power relationships, greater emphasis on communication and the construction of meaning both lessens the need for coercion and economizes the cost of domination. Castells asserts that the more meaning can be manipulated through communication, the less need there is for violence. He makes clear that, between the two instruments, the ability to shape the human mind to build consent or gain acquiescence through communicative action is a more powerful, decisive, and lasting form of domination than the submission of bodies by intimidation or violence. In terms of economizing the cost of domination, Harold Lasswell noted that Soviet propaganda was an instrument of total policy encompassing the full range of state functions. Defining political propaganda as the management of mass communications for power purposes, Lasswell stated that the intent of Soviet propaganda was to economize the material cost of power in achieving world dominance. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode and that you'll join me in the next, where we will be updating the definition of propaganda. If you'd like to download and listen to a podcast version of this channel's videos, they are available through most of the podcast directories such as on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Or you can visit either the Propaganda Universe's Buzzsprout page or main website through the links located in the video description. And as always, remember to like, subscribe, and share this video. If you find value in the content, please consider joining Propaganda Universe's Patreon community of supporters or making a contribution through PayPal in the links also found in the description. I hope to see you again for the next episode, and thank you so much for joining me in the Propaganda Universe.